Okay, we're back from break, and now we're going to talk about room schedules. And I'm not going to worry about the demolition anymore because we only want to schedule our new rooms. So I'm going to pull up my A101 where I have the basement and the first floor rooms all placed and tagged. And Dan, remind me to go over what happens if you delete a room because I don't want to forget that part. He was just asking me that question. That's a good question. Okay, so now, if you scroll down in your browser, you'll notice under Schedules and Quantities, you already have a room finish schedule because it was in the template that we used in Assignment A, and it's been there ever since. So as we created rooms, the schedule was busy populating with rooms and names and numbers in it. So if you double-click the door schedule, sorry, not door schedule, room finish schedule, you'll see your rooms, but I left it in the template, but I didn't make it perfect. I wanted you to be able to go in and modify it so it works the way we want it to. I could have just as easily said, let's go to View and we'll create a brand new schedule, but instead I left one in there that's already kind of been started. So, first thing that's wrong with this schedule is the rooms are not in order. They're actually in the random order that I happen to place them in the project. They're not sorting. So the way schedules work, there's actually two views. You know, when you have a plan view, that's a view. You put it on a sheet, it's a viewport, but its properties are really one and the same, and you can activate it on the sheet and work on it just the same as if you pulled it up as a view. With a schedule, it's a little bit different. You have what I call the ugly view of the schedule, which is what we're looking at now. And then once you put it on a sheet, you have what I call the pretty view of the schedule, where you see the formatting, you see the font, the size of the text, whether it's bold or not, how big it is, and exactly how wide the columns are going to be and how it fits on the sheet. This ugly view, I can stretch the column width, and it's just for convenience, because what I'm really doing is I'm looking at the data of this schedule. It's almost like a raw spreadsheet. I don't know if any of you have worked with Microsoft Access, which is a database program. In a database, everything is stored in just tables with columns and rows of information. And then when you print out a report from a database, it formats it and makes it look pretty. It's kind of like the sheet is your report and the ugly view of the schedule is your raw database table. And because Revit files, your project file is a database, it has all these powers built into it. So the first thing we want to do in the ugly view is we want to modify how everything appears in terms of the order and what the column headings say and how it's broken up. So there's 5 edit buttons here in your properties palette for this ugly schedule view. Fields, filters, sorting, grouping, formatting, and appearance. Well, it really doesn't matter which of these 5 buttons you hit to start with. If I go Fields and I hit Edit, notice up here at the top, now this dialog has 5 tabs running across, and those 5 tabs are the same as these 5 edit buttons. So if you guess wrong, you say, well, let's see, I bet I have to go to Fields to figure out what order they go in, and I'm wrong. I just click over to sorting and grouping. And that's what we want to fix first, is we want to sort the schedule by the field called number. And if we go back to fields here, on the right, the scheduled fields is the ones that are in the schedule. And what these are these are parameters of rooms. On the right are the parameters that are going to appear as columns in our schedule. On the left are the room parameters that we're not using right now. So if I want to add area as a column to my schedule, I highlight it on the left, I hit add, and it adds it on the list of scheduled fields. So the word field is kind of synonymous with column of the schedule, which is kind of synonymous with a parameter. Room parameters become the fields that form the columns of the schedule. How's that for terminology? But hopefully that makes sense, and as you use it, maybe it'll make a little more sense from here. So I want to go to sorting and grouping, and this field that's called number here, I want to sort by that number. Even though it says room number in the schedule, that's the heading that that column receives. So the heading at the top of the column may be the same as the parameter in that column. It may be typed differently. So I want to sort by number, and then when I say, well, this says ascending, I could go backwards if I wanted, but I want to say OK. So now it goes in order from 001 up through 111. Then the next thing I want to do, I'm going to look at my handout here, and I'm going to scroll down to Sheet A601, at the end. Come on. Too tall. Okay, so this is how my room finish schedule should look. So instead of saying room name, room number, I want it just to be NO period because it won't take up as much width. So I change it here, I say capital NO period, and I can just type it right in there. Now the other way to do that is to go into this edit formatting button right here. I'm back into these tabs, and now when it says formatting, here are the fields, and if I highlight one of those fields, this is what the heading is going to read for that field. So the parameter of number of rooms is going to have a heading in the schedule that's NO period. But it's easier to just come in here. I want that to be all caps, so I'm going to type room name in all caps, and then I'm going to put, I didn't change the comments to all caps in my handout, or the finish, so I was sloppy. I'm going to fix that though. Now we want to add area into our schedule, so for that we go to Fields Edit. And again, here are the ones we're not using, here are the ones we're using. So I can highlight area, and then I click, let's see, I want area to be right after room name. So if I highlight the one after room name and hit add, I should have done it the other way. It should have been before. But if I get it in the wrong spot, I just leave it highlighted and I say move it up. So now I've got name, number, name, area. And so there's my area. And it's left justifying, so I can modify that under formatting and say I want the area column to be aligned to the right. So now it's right justifying, which is how you'd want that number to read. Okay, and I want area to be in all caps, so I'm going to click on that heading and change it to area in capitals. So now, what are you doing here, Hourglass?
How'd you want to do it?
I went into Formatting Edit, and on the Formatting tab you see the names of the various columns, the fields. I highlighted area and I changed down here under Alignment right. So if you're figuring out how to do lots of things with schedules, you can kind of just thumb your way through these 5 tabs and look around, and you can figure some of this stuff out by just kind of trial and error. Try it, see if it changes, and then you're going to get the hang of it. So once you've worked with schedules, you'll be able to put a schedule together. Let's say you want to do a wall schedule that says how many square feet of gypboard do I have. That could be a wall schedule, or it could be a material takeoff, which is another kind of schedule. So you can pretty much invent a schedule of Revit in Revit and just say, okay, what kind of elements am I going to schedule? I'm going to schedule doors, windows, floors. You could do a takeoff of square footage of floors if you want. All kinds of things. So now the next thing I want to do is let's go ahead and create our sheet to put it on, and then we'll have our pretty view to go with our ugly view. So I'm going to go to Sheets here, right click New Sheet, and I guess I better save because it's prompting me to. Okay, so I want to use the My Hayden Smith title block, the current to plot version. I want to change that to A601. And I want to call this Schedules here. Summit K. All that stuff carries over. Now this 11.3 came in because I just created that sheet, so it puts today's date in there until I change it otherwise. But all the other project parameters show through. Reviewing from Assignment J last week. So now I'm ready to drag and drop my schedule onto this sheet. Now you'll find that schedules are a little bit different. Notice how on the other sheets, like A101, it shows the 2 floor plan views that are on the sheet. Well, you drag and drop just like you do with plan views. So if I grab room finish schedule and drag it out there and drop it onto the sheet, that works. But one difference here is when you scroll back down and look at the sheet, it doesn't nest. For some reason, Revit doesn't nest the schedule names under the sheet name that you've placed on that sheet. Personally, I think they should do that. I don't know why they don't. But one thing that's different, remember you can't put a floor plan on 2 different sheets, the same view. With schedules, I could put this room finish schedule on 5 sheets if I wanted to. because you're never going to have a detail number and a sheet number that points to a schedule like you do in a large plan or a building section or something. So I guess that's why we have that ability. The other nice thing about schedules is I like to have on my project one sheet that shows the entire finished schedule. So if it's a big building with 5 floors, I show all 5 floors in the schedule on that sheet. But then on my first floor, you can make a mini schedule that just shows the rooms on the first floor and place that on your first floor plan right next to the plan sheet. And so then you can have a second floor schedule on the second floor plan sheet and so on. And because it's Revit, there's no chance that the 2 schedules aren't going to be updated together. Because when you change the information about a room, it changes in all the schedules that that room is shown in. Just like when you move a wall, the wall is updated in all floor plan and section views that that wall shows up in. So it's an object. The room is one object in the database. And when you go in here and say, what's the floor finish on that room? You're actually changing properties of the room itself. Now let's just do an example here. First of all, I'm going to widen that column so that I can read on one line. So let's go to our basement plan. I'm going to go to my A101 sheet. I'm going to activate the sheet. And I want my new garage to have sealed concrete for the floor finish. I'm going to use the code SC for sealed concrete. So if I select the room and I scroll down underneath here in the properties, you'll see that there's a floor finish in the properties of the room. So if I type SC and apply that, nothing happens in the plan, but when I go back to my schedule, now the column for floor finish next to the new garage has SC in it. So I can either do it by grabbing the room, which is kind of a rare way. You don't do it that often, or I can do it right in the schedule. Now I can't do it in the pretty view. You can't click in any of these fields. So the pretty view is just kind of like a database report. It shows the contents of the information and it formats it the way you want to see it on the sheet. But to get into the guts of it and change it, I have to edit the actual ugly view. And you can do that as a shortcut. You can just right-click on it on the sheet and say Edit Schedule. And that's synonymous for my term of pull up the ugly view of the schedule. And then you can go in here and make your changes. So then if I actually want that SC to be SC-1, I just change it there. And it's changed it in the room properties, and it's changed it on the pretty view of the schedule on the sheet. And I also probably want those to be center justified, so I'm going to go into Formatting, Floor Finish, and the Alignment property again, I'm going to change that to Center. So now if I go back to my pretty view, there it is. And so then we're ready to do some more formatting. Let's say I want this to appear differently. I want a heavy outline around my schedule, which is something I like to typically do. I'll have to, again, go back to the ugly view. Then I go to Appearance. And I say, okay, I want an outline, so I check this box. And I have wide lines. So if I use that line weight and say okay, you don't see it in the ugly view. You only see it in the pretty view. So there's that outline. And I say, well, that's wide lines. That's the widest line that Revit gave me, but I want it to be thicker than that. So now we go back to what we were doing earlier tonight. We go to, anybody remember how to define the line styles now? It was Manage. Now we would think it'd be Object Styles, but it's not because we're dealing with lines. So it's under Additional Settings, Line Styles. And hit the plus sign, and then again, there's where we were dealing with room separation, and I kind of added a couple. So now let's go ahead and add, I'll say New, and I'm going to call this Very Wide Lines. So I'm sticking with their naming scheme, which I don't really like, but Very Wide Lines. And it's a subcategory of lines, that's how it works. So I say OK. And then I change the line width, the line weight, sorry, to a 7. And I leave it black and solid. Then nothing happened because I have to go back into my ugly view now and say, okay, back to appearance, I want it to be not wide lines, but very wide lines. That's the new style I just created, so now it's available on that pick list. Go back to my pretty view, and there it is. That's the bolder outline. I like that better. And then the same would be for font. I also want this number to be right justified, so you know, you get the idea. You go through these things. I go to, and the field for the room, oh, I'm in the door schedule, sorry. Let's close that. Okay, so I want to right justify the number, so I go to formatting for that. Right alignment. And so then we've got the start of things, and then I can come in. I'm not going to grade you on what codes you leave for the floor finish, base finish, wall finish, and all that, so you can just kind of come up with your own naming system. I want to say the new, what is it, the breakfast room, that's going to be wood floor finish, so I'm going to say WD40? No, WD1. And then I'm going to do the kitchen, and I might have, well, let's say WD1, because that's really what the floor is made of. The living room is existing, so I'm not even going to list a finish on that. Family room, I kept calling it study or den. That's the old kitchen, room 106. So that's actually an existing floor finish, and I'm not going to replace it, but I'm going to say, well, I could put a comment here. I could say existing so that when you add the new floor next to it, you can get a nice, good wood finish all the way through. So you got the comments field for that. Now, once you've done one code once in this column, if I go to the powder room, well, that's not a good example. Let's see. Breakfast, kitchen. I've already done those two, but let's say I want to put a code for existing. Once you've typed it once, you'll find it in a pick list for that same column, so you don't have to type it over and over, which is nice. Now, if you want to just leave those blank, that's okay, but just show that you know how to fill these things in. So if I look at what I have on the handout, I put existing concrete, and I put ceramic tile, wood, existing, and so on. So just do something kind of like that. Now, the ceiling height, if you try to put in 8 feet, now you might say, well, we built ceilings. Can't Revit read the height of the ceiling? Because it's there. It's really 8 foot whatever up there. That's one feature that Revit doesn't have. It can't automatically look to the ceiling and read it and put it into the room properties. So you have to plug that in. And maybe they'll add that eventually, but where it gets messy, then what happens if you have soffits? What height would it read? If you have a sloped vaulted ceiling or something, what would it read? I personally think it should automatically plug in a number unless there's more than one, then it should say varies or something. But it doesn't. So now, if we try to type in a number, let's say the breakfast room.
So don't you usually put on the reflected ceiling plan, or why would you have it in schedule?
It just depends. Some architects and interior designers put it in the schedule, and some label it on the ceiling plan, some put it in both.
Okay.
But unfortunately with Revit, that's one exception to the rule about, well, in Revit you can put it as many times and it'll change everywhere. If you put it on the ceiling plan and you put it in the schedule, it won't change both places because you're having to kind of type it on the schedule. But if you tag it on the ceiling plan, and let me just show you that. That wasn't something we did.
So
But
that's why I was asking in terms of a soffit and a recessed area.
Now here's my new ceiling plan. And you can tag a ceiling in Revit. So if I go to Annotate, Tag by Category, and I click on the ceiling, it says you got to have the ceiling tag loaded, so I'm going to load it. I go out here to Annotations, Architectural, Ceiling with Height, ceiling tag with height. Then it tags, well, let me try it again here. It puts it as gyp wall board only 1/2. So it puts the name of the ceiling type and then it puts a height on there. And it did read that 9 foot. It's just not smart enough to read it and put it in the schedule. So, yeah. I mean, you're right. In a lot of cases, you would just leave it in, but there are interior designers and architects who do go ahead and put it in here. So, since we've got it in there, let's try to use it. Edit schedule. And if I go into the breakfast room, it was it 8 feet? Is that what I just... Oh, I have a short memory, don't I? 9 foot 0. So I'm going to try to type in on breakfast 9 foot and hit enter. It should convert it to 9 foot 0, and it doesn't like that. So if I put -0 inches and click somewhere else, still doesn't like it. What if I just type 9? Well, when Hayden created the ceiling height column, because that's not one that's automatically built into Revit, maybe for the reason you say, maybe the Revit people are thinking, well, you don't really necessarily want a ceiling height as a room parameter. So I created this, I realized I'd messed it up, and I left it in there, so you'd have to figure out how to fix it. How's that for mean? Okay, so let's fix that. Well, first of all, which of these 5 tabs do you think we're dealing with when we're talking about this column not being right? Anybody have a guess?
Field?
Fields. You are correct, sir. So I look in here and I say ceiling height. If I try to edit that, I see that its type of parameter is not length, it's number. Remember when we built our countertop, those parameters for dimensions had to be length. And that length automatically converted from a number to feet and inches because it knew it had to be length. So there's the problem, and you can't modify that because it's grayed out. So we need to delete Hayden's ceiling height. So just highlight it on the list of fields in the schedule, and rather than removing it, I literally want to delete it. And it says, are you sure you want to delete ceiling height? Because I had entered 9 on one of those, it's going to blow that away. I say, yes, it didn't work. So then I say, okay, and it's gone. Now let's add it back in again. So I go back to fields, and I say, not add because it's not even on the list. I say add parameter, which creates a new one. It really should say create parameter because that's what we're doing. And it knows that this is going to be a room parameter because that's what our schedule is a room schedule. So then I say the name is ceiling, the name. And here's the tricky part. The type of parameter, I need to say length, not number, which is, or integer, or text.
Why would they do a length or something in the vertical plane?
Well, length is a term for feet and inches. It means a dimension measured in whatever units. Yeah. So it's not like the length of a countertop. It's a distance, basically. So when we group it under dimensions because that makes sense. So now when I go in and hit, I need to move that up so it's right after ceiling finish, so I hit move up and say OK. So now if I try again, I type 9 and hit enter, it converts it to 9 feet 0 inches because it's a length parameter. In other words, it knows that's a distance in our current units, which are feet and inches. And
that is not tagged in the plan.
Right. So what I just typed,
yeah,
so what I just typed really doesn't, it could be wrong based on where the real ceiling is. It's just a field I put in the schedule so I could type it in. So, that's how that parameter was created. It's not one of those things that's directly linked to the model. And then the heading here, we want to actually call it just CLG period HT period. Oops. Then I'm going to go ahead and capitalize comments. And then, so on this floor, I'm going to go ahead and make it all caps. Base. Wall. Ceiling. And then finish should be all caps. And while I'm at it, I'm going to make the heading, the title of the schedule be in caps. Room finish schedule. And I can go back to my pretty view now, and those changes all propagate into this view. Now there's a couple little features of schedules that I think they need to improve on. One of them is you can't make the name of the schedule. Remember how we were talking earlier in the floor plan, it might be called level 1 demo in the view list, but on the sheet you want to say first floor demolition plan, and so that's title on sheet. Well, schedules don't have an analogous kind of property. Whatever you call it in the browser, it's going to be called on the sheet. So if I wanted to call that room schedule, notice when I renamed it under schedules here, I changed it in the pretty view, that changed it right here to room finish schedule. If I right click and rename and say finish schedule, there's no way to put something other than what it shows up in the view name. That's a kind of a little pet peeve of mine. But the other thing that I think is a little bit more of a problem is I normally want the heading to be bigger than the headings of the columns. And if you go back into the ugly view and go to Edit Appearance, there is header text and body text. So we can make the headers bold and make them just a little bit bigger. So let's bump it from 1/8 to 5/32, just make them slightly bigger. Again, you don't see it in the ugly view, you only see it in the preview. But the problem is, the heading is going to be the same font and boldness and size of the column headings. So the name of the schedule cannot be made bigger than the column headings. And what I wish they would do